The late afternoon sun spilled through the tall windows of Oak Ridge Middle School's front hallway, catching flecks of dust that floated like lazy snow. It should have been the soft, harmless hour when kids stuffed backpacks, checked phones, and made weekend plans. But today, a knot of students had formed by the lockers, the kind of cluster that meant trouble. At the center was a girl, maybe 13, maybe younger, clutching her books like they were a shield. She had long chestnut hair pulled into a neat braid, a faded denim jacket, and eyes that looked like they'd learned to hold tears without letting them fall. Facing her was a boy her age, bigger than her, his voice sharp enough to cut. "Come on, princess," he jeered, shoving her shoulder so she stumbled back against the lockers. "You think you're better than everyone? Think your dad's money makes you special?" A ripple of laughter broke from the crowd, nervous laughter, the kind people use when they don't want to get caught picking a side. From across the lobby, a man had stopped mid-step. He'd been walking toward the exit, his baseball cap low over his brow, a paper grocery bag in one hand. He wore jeans that had seen too many washes and a green flannel shirt rolled at the sleeves. No one noticed him yet, but his eyes were fixed on the scene like a soldier sighting a threat. His name was Caleb Turner. He was 38, a single dad, and, though no one here knew it, a veteran who'd served tours he never talked about. The grocery bag was for dinner with his daughter, Lily, who was still in math club somewhere down the hall. Caleb's boots slowed. Something about the girl's face, the way she held herself against the blow, like she'd had practice, struck something deep. He had seen fear before, the kind that doesn't cry out for help because it already knows help won't come. The boy pushed again. Her books fell. Pages slapped the linoleum like small, sharp smacks. Caleb's grip tightened around the bag until the paper crinkled. The hallway was filled with the thin, cruel hum of kids watching but not acting. He stepped forward. The sound of his boots on tile carried in the sudden hush. When he reached the circle, he didn't bark or shout. His voice was calm, steady, and quiet enough to force everyone to lean in. "That's enough." The boy looked up, startled. Caleb didn't look angry. He looked certain. And certainty, real certainty, was heavier than rage. The crowd shifted. A few kids slipped away, suddenly remembering they had somewhere else to be. The girl stood frozen, her braid trembling against her back. Caleb knelt, gathering her books in careful stacks. He handed them to her without taking his eyes off the boy. "You done here?" he asked. Not a threat, not a question that needed an answer. The boy muttered something under his breath and backed away, his shoulders deflating. Within seconds, the hallway was empty except for Caleb, the girl, and the faint scent of pencil shavings and floor polish. He didn't know her name. He didn't know that her father's office sat at the top floor of the tallest glass building in town. He only knew what he'd been taught in the desert, under fire. If you see someone in trouble, you move. Caleb Turner didn't look like much to most people. And as he would learn soon, moving in that moment would change everything. Before we dive into the story, make sure to like the video and hit that subscribe button. It helps us keep creating more stories. In the town of Millstone, he was just the quiet guy who fixed up old trucks in his driveway, kept to himself, and showed up at every one of his daughter's softball games with a folding chair and a thermos of coffee. Some neighbors guessed he worked construction. Others thought he was between jobs. No one guessed that he'd once commanded a squad in places where the air was so hot it could burn your lungs. Since coming home, Caleb had been living in a small, single-story house on the edge of town. The roof needed patching, the yard was more dirt than grass, and the fridge was usually half empty. But Lily never felt the lack, not with the way he listened to her, the way he made every moment with her feel like the center of his world. What people didn't see was the weight he carried. Nightmares. Old wounds that ached when the weather turned cold. The memory of friends who didn't make it back. And under all that, a quiet sense that folks like him didn't get noticed until something went wrong. The boy from the hallway, Tyler Nash, was the opposite. He was loud, confident, and carried himself like the school belonged to him. It helped that his uncle was on the school board and his mom chaired the annual fundraising gala. Rules bent for Tyler. Teachers gave warnings instead of detentions. And if a kid crossed him, they learned quickly how small their world could become. Then there was the girl, Samantha Sam Brooks. She was new this year, and while no one knew much, rumors spread fast. Some said her dad owned half the office buildings downtown. Others whispered about her arriving each morning in the back seat of a black SUV with tinted windows. Whatever the truth, it made her a target for kids like Tyler, who didn't like anyone who didn't fall in line. Around them moved the quiet ones, classmates who kept their heads down, teachers who looked the other way when trouble stirred, parents who shrugged and said, "Kids will be kids." They weren't cruel, but they were absent in the moments that mattered. Injustice had a way of slipping through the cracks here. The PTA decided who got new textbooks. The mayor's friends got contracts for road work. Even in the schoolyard, power didn't always belong to the ones who deserved it. Caleb didn't think of himself as anyone's hero. But that moment in the hallway stirred something in him. The same thing that made him step between his men and enemy fire years ago. It wasn't about winning. It was about standing where no one else would. And though Sam didn't know it yet, she'd just found the one person in town who couldn't be bought, silenced, or scared away. The next morning, the air in Millstone had that brittle chill that comes just before winter digs in. Caleb parked his old Ford in front of the school, sipping lukewarm coffee while Lily talked about her science project in the passenger seat. He smiled, nodded, letting her words fill the space. He didn't expect anyone to remember what happened in the hallway. Kids forgot things fast. But by the time he dropped Lily off and walked toward the main office to sign a permission slip, he could feel eyes on him. Whispers. Quick glances. Doors closing a beat too soon. Tyler was leaning against the trophy case with two friends, grinning like a wolf. "Well, if it isn't Captain America," he said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. Caleb kept walking. He'd learned long ago that silence can hit harder than words. But Tyler wasn't done. "My mom says guys like you don't belong hanging around schools unless they work here," he called. "You even have a job?" Caleb didn't turn around. He just signed the paper in the office, thanked the secretary, and left. Still, the words followed him out the door like a bad smell. That afternoon, the phone rang. It was the school principal, Ellen Sharp, a woman with neat hair, sharper glasses, and a tone that suggested she didn't like being inconvenienced. "Mr. Turner," she began, "I understand there was an incident yesterday involving a student." Caleb leaned against the counter, listening. "I'd like to remind you that school grounds are for enrolled students, parents with business here, and authorized staff. We appreciate community members being involved, but we ask that you allow school personnel to handle student conflicts." Her words were polite, but underneath, he heard it. The dismissal. She wasn't interested in what happened, only in keeping things quiet. "I was here to pick up my daughter," Caleb said evenly. "And I saw a kid being shoved into a locker." "Yes, well," Principal Sharp replied. "Sometimes children have disagreements. We try not to escalate them unnecessarily." He almost laughed. A grown man pushing against an enemy position was escalation. A boy twice a girl's size shoving her into metal lockers was something else entirely. The call ended with a brittle, "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Turner," and he knew she'd already filed him away in her mind as the type who interferes. By Friday, things had shifted. At Lily's softball practice, a few parents stood farther from him than usual. One mother, a woman in a designer puffer coat, glanced at him and whispered to the man beside her. Caleb caught the words "troublemaker" and "making a scene." It clicked slowly. Tyler's mother was on the PTA, and Tyler's uncle was on the school board. And in a town like Millstone, people who sat at the right tables didn't take kindly to strangers disrupting the order. Meanwhile, Sam was quieter than ever. He saw her once, walking down Main Street with her backpack slung low, head down. The same black SUV idled at the curb, windows dark. She didn't see him, but he noticed the way she moved, not just shy, but wary. That night, as Caleb washed dishes in the small, dim kitchen, Lily asked the question he'd been avoiding. "Dad, why do people act weird around you now?" He dried his hands, sat across from her. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "when you stand up for someone, the people who were okay with things the way they were, they don't like you much for it." Lily frowned. "But you were just helping." "Yeah," Caleb said. "And sometimes that's enough to make people nervous." He didn't tell her the rest, that in towns like this, the wrong person thinking you were a problem could mean you lost jobs you didn't even have yet. That whispers could close doors before you even knocked. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the window pane. Inside, Caleb felt that old, familiar hum in his chest, the one that told him trouble was building. He didn't know how deep it went yet, but he could tell by the way people's voices dropped when he walked in a room. This wasn't over. Saturday mornings in Millstone were slow. The diner on Main Street served coffee in thick ceramic mugs, the kind that kept your hands warm even after the steam faded. Caleb sat in the corner booth with Lily, sharing pancakes, letting her drown hers in syrup. From the window, he spotted Sam walking past, hugging her backpack again. She didn't see him, but something about the way she kept looking over her shoulder tightened the knot in his stomach. Lily was busy sketching in her notebook, so Caleb's mind drifted. Flashback. Hot sand under his boots. The weight of the vest pressing into his shoulders. Voices in the headset, urgent but controlled. He remembered crouching behind a low wall, scanning the street. There was a boy. Couldn't have been more than 12, cornered by two older men. Caleb didn't speak their language well, but he understood fear. He stepped forward without thinking, raising one hand, keeping the other near his sidearm. His voice was steady, his stance open but ready. The men backed off. The boy ran. Later, one of his squad joked that Caleb had the patience of a bomb tech and the stubbornness of a mule. But it wasn't patience, it was something else. That quiet stillness before you move, when you know the wrong step could ruin everything. The bell over the diner door rang, snapping him back to the present. Tyler Nash and two friends walked in, loud and careless, like they owned the place. They spotted Caleb almost instantly. One of them muttered something. Tyler smirked. Caleb just sipped his coffee. He didn't rise to bait, but his eyes stayed on them, not glaring, just watching, the way he used to watch rooftops for movement. Lily didn't notice the tension, but the waitress did. Her glance flicked between the two tables, uneasy. Tyler eventually wandered off to the counter, but not before tossing out, "Careful, Turner. People don't forget." Caleb didn't respond. He'd learned long ago that the right silence could plant more doubt than an argument. On the walk home, Lily skipped ahead, kicking at piles of leaves. Caleb's gaze was far away, drifting back to moments he rarely let himself remember, holding a map under a red lens flashlight, speaking into a radio while tracers burned the night sky. Back then, people relied on him to read a situation fast and move before anyone else even saw the danger. That skill hadn't gone away. It just didn't have a place in small-town life until now. And as much as he wanted to keep his head down, some part of him knew the kind of trouble building here didn't go away on its own. He didn't know yet exactly where Sam fit into it, but he could feel the pieces sliding into place, the way you feel a storm in the air before the first drop falls. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon, the kind where the clouds hang low and heavy like the whole sky is holding its breath. Caleb was in the school parking lot, leaning on his truck while waiting for Lily. He spotted Sam standing near the bike racks, her braid loose today, shoulders hunched. The black SUV was nowhere in sight. Then Tyler showed up. He wasn't alone. Two older boys from the high school trailed behind him. They moved like they had a plan. Caleb's gut tightened. He could see it in their body language, the casual way they cut off her path, the angle of their shoulders, the smirk on Tyler's face. They weren't just teasing her today. They were cornering her. Sam took a step back. Tyler stepped forward. Caleb moved before he could think twice. His boots crunched on the gravel, steady and slow, every step a clear signal. "What's going on here?" His voice was calm, but carried. Tyler turned, mouth curling. "Nothing. Just talking to a friend." Sam's eyes flicked to Caleb, a flash of relief and fear tangled together. "I think the conversation's over," Caleb said. He didn't raise his voice, but something in the tone made the two older boys glance at each other. Tyler laughed, but it was thin. "You think you can just walk away?" Caleb said, cutting him off. Still calm, still steady. Tyler stepped closer, close enough that Caleb could smell the gum in his mouth. "My mom says you're trouble. Says you don't even have a job. Maybe I should call the cops. Tell them some guy's hanging around the school." Caleb didn't blink. "You could," he said. "But I think your uncle would hate it if the cops saw the footage from the security cameras right now." Tyler froze. "How?" "I know about the cameras over the bike racks. And the one by the west door. You didn't notice them because you don't look up much." The two older boys shifted uneasily. "And here's the thing," Caleb went on. "I also know your uncle's on the school board. Which means if anyone sees you messing with a girl half your size, it's not just a suspension. It's his reputation. It's your mom's little charity events. It's all of it." Tyler's smirk was gone now. "You don't know anything about me," he muttered. Caleb's eyes stayed on him, unblinking. "I know enough." Then he did something no one expected. He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. A grainy but clear video played. Tyler shoving Sam into the lockers last week. Caleb had been standing far enough back that day to get the whole thing without anyone noticing. Gasps rose from the small crowd that had started to gather. Funny thing about phones, Caleb said, sliding it back into his pocket. They remember everything. Tyler's face flushed. One of the older boys muttered, "Come on," and tugged his arm. They left without another word. Sam stood still for a moment, then let out a shaky breath. "You filmed it?" she asked quietly. "Yeah," Caleb said. Sometimes the truth needs proof. That evening, the black SUV pulled up outside Caleb's house. A man stepped out, tall, suit pressed sharp, eyes scanning like he was used to assessing a room before entering. "Mr. Turner?" he asked. Caleb nodded. The man's gaze softened. "I'm Michael Brooks, Sam's father." Caleb glanced at the SUV, where Sam sat in the back seat, watching through the glass. "She told me what you did," Brooks said, "and she showed me the video." For a second, Caleb braced himself for some polished threat, a warning to stay away from his daughter. Instead, Brooks extended his hand. "I've spent a lot of money trying to keep her safe," he said. "But today, you did something money can't buy. You made them stop." Caleb took the handshake, firm and even. Brooks lowered his voice. "I also know about the rumors, that certain people are trying to make life difficult for you. If they keep pushing, you let me know. They'll stop." Caleb didn't promise anything. He wasn't looking for a savior, but he nodded once. The SUV pulled away, taillights glowing red in the dusk. Caleb stood there for a long moment, hands in his pockets, watching the street. In the distance, the clouds were breaking, a thin band of gold cutting through. He hadn't set out to win anyone's gratitude. He'd just done what needed doing. But now, for the first time since he came home, he felt something shift, like maybe the past he'd been carrying wasn't just a burden. Maybe it was a weapon against the kind of people who counted on everyone else staying quiet. And that was something he knew exactly how to use. 2 weeks later, Millstone felt different. It wasn't louder or busier, just different. You could feel it in the way people looked at Caleb now. They still whispered, but the tone had changed. The shift started small. One afternoon at the diner, the waitress set a slice of pie on his table. "On the house," she said, almost shy. "For, you know what you did." Then the local paper ran a short article. "Local man stands up to school bullying." It wasn't Caleb's words. He hadn't spoken to a reporter, but Sam had, and the article described a calm, firm intervention that protected a student and held aggressors accountable. The video he'd taken had been sent to the school board. They couldn't ignore it. Tyler was suspended for 2 weeks. The 2 older boys faced disciplinary action at the high school. And though no one said it outright, everyone knew the fallout at home was worse. Principal Sharp issued a carefully worded statement about creating a safe environment for all students. But she also called Caleb personally, not to warn him this time, but to thank him. It wasn't warm, exactly, but it was different. The biggest surprise came from Michael Brooks. One crisp morning, he invited Caleb to meet him in his office on the top floor of the tallest glass building in town. Caleb wasn't sure why he said yes. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was the way Brooks had looked him in the eye that night by the SUV. The office was all windows and polished wood. Brooks gestured to a chair. "I've been thinking," he said, "about how small towns protect their own, and how dangerous that can be when the wrong people are in charge. You're not afraid to act. I could use someone like that." Caleb raised an eyebrow. "Doing what?" "Security consulting. Risk assessment. Making sure people can't use power to hurt others. In schools, in workplaces, anywhere." Brooks smiled faintly. "Pays better than odd jobs. And you'd have resources." Caleb thought about Lily, about the mortgage that always felt a month behind. He thought about how good it felt to see Tyler back down, not because he was scared, but because the truth had pinned him in place. "I'll think about it," Caleb said. That weekend, the Millstone Fall Festival drew half the town to the park. Lily ran off to play games with her friends, her laughter mixing with the sound of the band playing on the stage. Caleb stood near the cider stand, sipping from a paper cup, when Sam walked up. She looked different now, still quiet, but not curled in on herself. Her braid was loose again, but her eyes were steady. "I wanted to say thank you," she said. "Not just for that day, but for not letting people forget." Caleb shook his head. "You don't owe me thanks." "Yeah, I do," she said. "Because you didn't have to." They stood in silence for a moment, watching kids race toward the pumpkin patch. "Hey," she added, glancing at him. My dad says he's hoping you'll work with him. I think you should. Caleb smiled. A small, real smile. We'll see. Tyler was there too, hanging by the edge of the festival with a couple of kids from his class. He didn't come near. When his eyes met Caleb's across the field, there was no smirk this time. Just a quick look away. It wasn't total redemption. Tyler was still a kid with too much confidence and too many connections. But now he knew the town wasn't his to rule. As the sun dipped behind the trees, string lights came on, casting a warm glow over the park. Lily came running back, her cheeks flushed from the cold, her hand slipping into his. Can we stay a little longer? She asked. Caleb looked around, at the people chatting without the edge of suspicion, at Sam walking beside her father, at the way the night felt lighter somehow. Yeah, he said softly. We can stay. And in that moment, with the hum of the festival in his ears and the weight in his chest eased just a little, Caleb knew something had shifted for good. He wasn't just the quiet man fixing trucks on the edge of town anymore. He was the man who had stepped in, and people had seen it. Sometimes, that's all it takes to change a place. 3 years later, Millstone had grown. A new community center stood where an abandoned warehouse used to be. The school had better lighting in the halls, more staff in common areas, and a clear anti-bullying policy that actually meant something. Caleb Turner still lived in his small house on the edge of town, but his life looked different now. He'd taken Michael Brooks's offer, starting with security consulting and eventually running a nonprofit that trained school staff, local businesses, and community groups on how to recognize and stop harassment before it could spread. It wasn't about playing the hero. It was about giving regular people the tools to act when they saw someone in trouble. Because Caleb knew from experience, the hardest part is often just deciding to step forward. Lily was in high school now, playing varsity softball, her laugh still as quick and bright as it had been when she was 10. Sometimes she helped at the workshops, passing out flyers or sharing how standing up for others had become second nature in her own life. Sam Brooks had grown too. She'd gone from the quiet girl with a wary gaze to a confident young woman who ran the student council and volunteered at the same community center Caleb helped open. She often spoke about the day someone stepped in for her and how it taught her to stand in the gap for others. Tyler Nash's life had taken a different turn. The suspension had been only the beginning. He'd graduated, but the reputation for trouble followed him. Last Caleb heard, he was working shifts at a hardware store in another town, keeping a low profile. Caleb didn't hate him. In fact, he hoped Tyler had found a way to grow. But he also knew some lessons are learned only after you've been stopped in your tracks. On a warm summer evening, Caleb stood outside the community center as the sun dipped low, kids spilling out after a workshop. One of them, a nervous-looking boy, hesitated by the door. Mr. Turner, he asked quietly, what if people get mad when you stand up? Caleb knelt so they were eye to eye. They might, he said. But here's the thing. The right kind of mad usually means you're doing something that matters. The boy nodded, the worry in his face softening just a little. As the streetlights flickered on, Caleb watched the boy join his friends. He thought about the years between then and that day by the lockers. How a single step forward had rippled into something bigger than he ever expected. Sometimes the fight isn't about winning. Sometimes it's about showing that silence isn't the only option. Sometimes our greatest enemies help us discover our true strength. True justice doesn't destroy, it rebuilds what others failed to recognize. If this story inspired you, subscribe and share it so others remember. The smallest action can start the biggest change. And you never know, you might be the person someone's waiting for.